Welcome, I'm Amy Nelson and I'm Executive Director of the Fair Housing of the Dakotas and a board member of the North Dakota Women's Network. We appreciate your interest in learning about the legislative process in North Dakota. We want to spend a few minutes summarizing that process so you can become involved in the issues that interest you. Due to time, I will not be able to explain all the details of the process, but this is meant as a quick overview of some of the most important steps. So let's get started. The North Dakota legislative session meets in odd-numbered years, from early January until about April. These are the only times laws can be made in North Dakota unless the governor calls a special session, which is very rare. First, an overview. A bill is a piece of legislation being proposed as a law. It is typically put forth by a legislator as a sponsor, but can also be put forth by state agencies and departments. For a bill to become a law, it must pass both sides of the legislature. These sides are the House and the Senate. If a bill passes both sides, the bill is then typically signed by the governor and filed with the Secretary of State to be made a law. Although if the governor does not sign the bill within 3 days of receiving it, the bill still becomes a law when filed with the Secretary of State. The governor also has the option of vetoing a bill. If the governor vetoes a bill within 3 days of receiving it, the House and the Senate must override the veto by a 2/3 vote in each side for it to become a law. I'm sure you've heard about checks and balances, and this is an example of what that means. Now let's get into some of the details of how a bill moves through the sides of the North Dakota legislature to become a law. A bill can be drafted by anyone, but remember, it must have a legislative sponsor unless filed by an agency. Bills also need to be reviewed by the Legislative Council to make sure they are formatted correctly. If you're interested in getting legislation drafted, it's always best to visit with your local legislator. For example, you are concerned that a train may hit a school bus on a country road which does not have signal arms. A bill could be introduced which requires all railroad crossings have signal arms. This drafted bill would be read or introduced into either the House or the Senate and then assigned to a committee on that side of introduction. There are several committees which a bill can be assigned to, and it's usually referred to the committee who has the best knowledge of the bill. Every introduced bill has a number, and the easiest way to follow a bill's progress is by visiting the legislative website and following the bill number. House numbers are usually a 4-digit number beginning with a 1, and Senate bills are usually a 4-digit number beginning with a 2. Bills have a limited time period in which they can be introduced, and legislators have limitations on the number of bills they can sponsor or co-sponsor. Bills which have money attached to them or fiscal notes must also be reviewed by the Appropriations Committee on that side of the legislature. After a bill is assigned to a committee, the chair of the committee decides when the bill's hearing will be held. You will need to review the legislative website to stay informed on when committee hearings will be held. Things are moving very quickly during the legislative session, so sometimes there is not much advance notice before a hearing. Committee hearings are open to the public, and you can testify as to on whether you support, do not support, or are neutral on a bill, or have any suggested changes. If you are representing somebody else or an agency or company when you testify or lobby, you must register as a lobbyist. If you are representing yourself as a private citizen, you do not need to register as a lobbyist, although you should consult the North Dakota Secretary of State's website or office for the most up-to-date information. As a general practice, the North Dakota Legislature works to ensure that all bills get at least one committee hearing. After a committee hearing, the committee will vote on whether they will recommend the bill for passage or not, and in rare times, take no position on a bill. The committee can also amend the bill or refer the bill to another committee for hearing and review. For example, a legislator feels that requiring signal arms is not worth the expense on roads which are not heavily traveled. Instead, the legislator wants the bus to stop and open their doors to view the tracks more clearly before crossing. As a result, the legislator offers an amendment of the bill language to that effect. The committee then refers the bill to the floor of that side of the legislature with its recommendation. A bill will be assigned a committee member or a carrier to take the bill to the floor and to brief the legislators on the committee's position on the bill. The floor is where all legislators present have an opportunity to speak in support or against passage of the bill, regardless of what the committee may have recommended. This is called floor debate. The floor can also vote to make any additional amendments. Following debate, the legislators then vote on the floor as to whether to pass the bill. If the bill does not have over 50% of the vote, it fails, and in most instances, it is dead and finished for that session. If the bill has over 50% of the support of legislators, it is then referred to the other side, either House or Senate, of the legislature to follow the same process again. Again, the general policy in North Dakota is that every bill gets floor debate. If a bill is passed by both the House and the Senate with the exact same language, it is then referred to the governor for signature and filed with the Secretary of State. If a bill is altered in either the House or Senate and passed in a way which is different than the other side passed it, that side gets an opportunity to vote on it again or to concur. If they pass or concur it, the bill then goes to the governor for signature. If that side does not concur, then a small conference committee is formed of members of both the House and the Senate to try to find language which will work for both sides so the bill can be passed. A bill typically becomes a law as of August 1st of that year unless it has other language or has an emergency clause attached to it. An emergency clause means it goes into effect upon its passage and filing with the Secretary of State. This will be noted in the bill and on the legislative website. The process of a bill becoming a law can move very quickly, but often it may seem a bit tedious or lengthy. This is because the legislative process is meant to be a deliberative process. This is to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to speak or act on the bill and raise any pros or cons so that the best laws get made. Again, it's checks and balances. This serious process of legislation can be not only informative but also fun. It might sound complicated, but it also is not that difficult as it may sound once it becomes a little familiar to you. If you have the time, go in and sit in on some committee hearings or listen online to floor session. Visit with people you know who are familiar about the process or seek a mentor to help you to get more comfortable. There are other pieces of the legislative process which may interest you. Issues such as testifying before committees, web access to the legislative process, and lobbying, for instance. Because our time is limited, if you have any questions about any of these processes, I'd encourage you to visit with the North Dakota Women's Network or legislator, or visit the North Dakota Legislative website. Only through involvement by interested people like yourself can you see the change you are seeking. One person truly can make a difference. We encourage you to speak out on issues which interest you and get informed. Again, thank you so much for your interest in the legislative process, and let us know if you have any questions.